Hi, everybody. This is Mark Morrow with JFK, the final investigation. Today's episode is Rockefeller Ties to the Warren Commission. And we have with us today author Richard DeSocio, and he is the author of Clash of Dynasties and many other Rockefeller-related books. How you doing today, Richard?
Good.
Good to have you. Really looking forward to your input on the topic. As I've said before on the podcast, I want to be clear, we may not have, the type of evidence that would convict the Rockefellers in a court of law at this time being tied to the Kennedy assassination. But we do see a lot of the name just comes up very frequently. We do think there's some ties, and we do think there's a circumstantial case that could be built. And what I do, and I think it's fair to say what Richard does, is try to continue to build that case the best that we can. Any comments there, Richard?
Well, I've done this for 40 years.
Yeah.
And once until a doubt that the Rockefellers masterminded this conspiracy. No doubt. It's no different when they carry out coups around the world to smack down world leaders.
Right.
Pretty much the same thing. Study their history. But they always hide their hand. These people operate under deep cover.
Of course, of course. So on that note, let's get right into it. Let's talk about the Warren Commission members. Let's whatever one that you want to start with, and let's go into the Rockefeller ties to them.
Okay, first of all, I want to show you a book I published back when.
Yep.
Can you read that? The Elements of
Yep.
Economic Destruction.
Yep.
I published it in 1980. I've been researching this since 1984 when Robert Blakey's book came out, which he co-authored, Plot to Kill the President. That brought me into the story.
Excellent.
And, I was doing this research for this economics book, which is really deals primarily with the decline of American manufacturing sector. And in the course of my research, I was studying objectively the titans of industry: Ford, Carnegie, Vanderbilt, and of course John Rockefeller, the biggest of all the titans. What I noticed was names were popping up in my study of Rockefellers as super capitalists, were popping up in the story of the JFK assassination, primarily on the Warren Commission. Right off the get-go would be John McCloy and Alan Dulles. Now, John McCloy was the top lawyer for the Rockefeller family. Okay, this is the big smoking gun of the Rockefeller presence in plotting this conspiracy, the makeup of the Warren Commission. Now, you go down these names, there's nothing in here, almost nothing. Maybe you get down further, but the seven ranking members are not nobody on this commission, barely anybody, is any of Lyndon Johnson's good old boys from Texas or his sweet F sweet thing. No, these are all people tied in with the Eastern establishment, Wall Street and Standard Oil and the Rockefellers. See, how do these people pop up? You say,
All right.
they didn't just wake up one day and say, "Oh, let's go let's write a narrative." Lone assassin narrative. Okay. No, they were. This proves that they were behind the whole thing.
Can you get into McCloy's involvement with Chase Bank and also kind of the World War II connection, which I think ultimately.
He was under Secretary of Defense during World War II.
Right.
His whole history ties with the Rockefellers. When he was in Harvard, he would go up to, Seal Harbor, Maine, and spend summers with the five Rockefeller boys. The Fortunate Five. Nelson. David. Go on and those, and teach them how to sail. This guy was part of the inner circle. See, all they do is prove. When I say all, I mean John McCloy is one of their many factotums or agents. All they have to do, they don't have to know anything. All they have to do is prove a loyalty to the Rockefellers, a blind loyalty. What they call useful idiots. Okay. So I want to read you from David Rockefeller's memoirs.
Sure.
And this was published 2002. I believe he died in 2017. Or
Correct.
actually, actually, when I published my book, Clash of Dynasties, two people were still alive accused of killing Kennedy, David Rockefeller and Henry Kissinger. So nobody can accuse me of writing books blaming dead people about things. I'm going to read it here. Now, this is from David Rockefeller's words. It's subchapter, short subchapter, a curious relationship. Starts on, I was disappointed that Jack, he doesn't call him Jack, he calls him Jack, and I never developed a close personal relationship. Okay. Now I go down a couple more paragraphs. He mentions Nelson was said to have made to him at the time he became chairman a statement, right? Nelson made the statement. Nelson was said to have made to him at the time he became chairman of the Chase Bank. Oh, by the way, this guy sat on 25 corporations. This is how the octopus operates. See, they put one person on multiple boards as their stand-ins, and then they report back to the family office. But this is just a Chase. Let me read you the sentence. Nelson reportedly told him, John McCloy, the family had used its influence to make him chairman, and that one of his jobs was to ensure that David would succeed him when he retired. Okay, so what do we got here? First of all, you got to understand, none of these corporations are sole proprietorships of the Rockefellers. They're big corporations with thousands of shareholders. But the Rockefellers used their corruption and influence to manipulate, all right? So he's got this John McCloy in there keeping the seat warm for David Rockefeller, right? Okay. Which David Rockefeller succeeded him as planned. Here he is. Who's on the War Commission? John McCloy. David Rockefeller standing at the Chase Bank, at the time probably the second or third biggest bank in the country, pretty much considered a Rockefeller bank controlled by the Rockefellers. I think David Rockefeller owned 2% of the bank outright, which is huge in a corporation that big.
Yes, it is. Massive.
So here it is. You have a Rockefeller stand-in on this list here, War Commission, all right? So just Rockefeller just dropped out of the clear blue sky and wanted to write a narrative? No, I don't think so. We could go on and on forever. Okay. Enough said.
Okay.
Let's do the Gaussies.
Okay.
This is what happened. This is the Rockefeller conspiracy. The Rockefeller conspiracy began in 1913. Okay. Following so-called Supreme Court breakup of Standard Oil, well, the Rockefellers aren't going to take this down. They're ruthless. They're ruthless. Whatever happened to Rockefellers as robber barons and ruthless? Whatever happened to that? Now they're honored as philanthropists. These people aren't philanthropists, they're criminals. They played a ploy on the nation, okay? What they did was, in response to the breakup, they did three things. They set up the Federal Reserve banking ripoff. It's not a bank, it's not federal, it's not a reserve. Okay, it bails out the Rockefeller-controlled bank. Anytime a bank goes bankrupt, the Federal Reserve tax steps in. We could go into the huge history about the Federal Reserve, but they use the taxpayers' money to bail out their failed banking system. Basically, that's why we have a national debt that's beyond anything you can think of paying off, trillions. And it just went bankrupt. When the Silicon Bank went under, who bailed it out? The taxpayers. This is what the Rockefellers said following they followed this. I don't want to get off too much, but this followed the collapse of the Knickerbocker Trust in 1907. This was their plan. Okay, where am I now? Okay. So what the Rockefellers did, okay, then they imposed income tax, 16th Amendment. Who authored it all? Who drafted it? Nelson Rockefeller's paternal grandfather, Senator Eldridge Nelson. Okay, Senator Nelson Eldridge. Okay.
Yeah.
The namesake of Governor Nelson Eldridge Rockefeller, or the Vice President Nelson Eldridge. See, Nelson's paternal grandfather. Most powerful man in the Senate. Well, when your son-in-law is the richest man on the planet, he was very wealthy to begin with, but he drafted it. And they drafted it, why? Because they wanted to impose income tax unconstitutionally on the American people to bail out their failed banking system. And then they set up the Federal Reserve. Anytime banks go bankrupt, they don't really go bankrupt. They just get absorbed, and then the taxpayers bail them out. They don't say that, but why we're paying the interest on the national debt, which has been accumulated for years because of all the bailouts of our failed banking system. Okay. Then the third, so then they set off what? The 501c3 device. So they taxed everybody but themselves.
Right.
Okay. They rolled the money over into, they rolled most of their Standard Oil shares into the newly created Rockefeller Foundation, first 501c3. So now they don't have to pay any taxes. So what happens? Those foundations grow at an escalating rate because they don't have to pay anything out. It's just over. That's why it gets bigger every year. They say they give away money. Well, who's giving away money? It gets bigger every year. But I want to cut to the chase here. What the Rockefellers did. This was the plan they set up when Supreme Court broke them up, supposedly, right? Into, I heard numbers high as 33 of what they call predecessor companies. Okay. What they did was they took their shares, they put them in the Rockefeller Foundation, or giving it away. Oh, where was the headquarters for the Rockefeller Foundation? Standard Oil headquarters at the time, 26 Broadway, which is really almost the heart of Wall Street. Where did they set up the Rockefeller Foundation headquarters? Down the hall from Standard Oil boardroom. Okay. Is this a disinvested board? No, this is totally controlled and owned. And then they put all their family members on the board. They put John Rockefeller, he was its first trustee. Well, they got a board of maybe a dozen trustees. Well, name one person on the planet that's going to sit in a boardroom and challenge John Rockefeller. Nobody can fill those shoes.
Yeah, that's not
When he
happening.
says things, people, yes, Mr. Rockefeller, we'll do whatever you say. All right, where am I?
So what's the tie?
This is what they did, okay?
Yeah.
They took over, people followed their footsteps, setting up these 501c3s. They went in, and what they did, this is what you do when you're in the zenith of wealth and power. You take over, you use your influence, you use your money, you use your connection, you use your ruthless to go in and take control on them. They don't own them, they control them, other foundations. See? And what they were doing was they were sitting various people who are part of the inner circle. John McCloy was one of them, and they would sit them on multiple foundations, see, multiple boardrooms, okay? So he had the Dulles brothers. See, they're running a ruse. See, what they're doing in secrecy, if you got a dozen foundations, you got 20 foundations, David Rockefeller talked about the biggest 20. See, they move in and take these over. And what they do, they work in concert. Every foundation will have a few shares of Standard Oil. Now, if you put those things in collectively, every one of those shares, those foundations contain millions and millions of shares of corporate stock. Okay, they have voting rights associated with them. Right. So if you can put together 10, 20, who knows how many? And the Chase Bank has the biggest trust department in the world. All those trust funds, all those trust accounts are filled with corporate stocks. So they can, in concert, control every corporation in America. What they were doing, they were taking certain family members, the Dulles, they would sit them on multiple foundations. They had Alan Dulles on the Ford Foundation. They had John Foster Dulles on the Rockefeller Foundation. Also chairman of the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. That's a massive story that ties to Eldridge Hess and a big chapter in American history, but I'm not going to get into it now. So other families, the Bundy family. George Bundy was, National Security Advisor for JFK. His brother, William Bundy, and Harvey Bundy. When John Foster Dulles had to step down because Nixon painted him a communist, who took over? Harvey Bundy. They had the William Bundy, McGeorge Bundy, and the father sitting on multiple foundations.
I want to interrupt for 1 second here. So McGeorge Bundy is very important for everybody to understand. Little known fact with JFK, JFK was often blamed for being the person that withheld the airstrikes during the Cuban Missile Crisis, but this is not true. He publicly took the blame. It was actually McGeorge Bundy who called off the airstrikes, and he later admitted this. It's a fact. Most people have no clue about that, but sorry, go ahead.
Well, George Bundy was chairman, was JFK's National Security Advisor, right? That was the next. You had Dean Rusk on one ear of, we saw this more with Lyndon Johnson. You had Dean Rusk. They were holdovers from the Johnson was told, don't remove anybody from the Kennedy administration. It looks too suspicious. Play along with it. Had Dean Rusk on one ear, had Bundy on the other ear, right? Dean Rusk is what? President of the Rockefeller Foundation. Okay. McGeorge Bundy, father was chairman of the board of Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. These are foundations. Carnegie was dead. The Rockefellers moved in and took it over. I could go on and on. This Carnegie Endowment Fund is one of the biggest stories connected with the Kennedy assassination. But I can't get into it all now. I want to stick with this. Okay, the Ford Foundation. Okay. At the time Kennedy was shot, okay, who was chairman of the Ford Foundation?
Who?
John McCloy. Alan Dulles was a Ford Foundation trustee. He stepped down and became CIA director. The Rockefellers had this massive plan. We should do a show on it sometime for their overthrow of Mossadegh. And this ties in what's going. When they smacked down Mossadegh, they set up a coup because Mossadegh wanted to share revenue streams from oil with the people. Well, the Rockefellers don't share anything. They're criminals.
Right.
They don't share. So they smacked him down, and they took over.
It would be a very good time to do an episode on that, especially with what's going on right now. But yeah, continue.
They smacked down Mossadegh, supposedly elected, but I always put the word elected in quotes. Okay. So they took him, the CIA, the Ford Foundation, run by John McCloy, and Alan Dulles, who's head of the CIA. Now, remember, Dulles stepped down from the Ford Foundation. Okay. Now, it's on the record, the Ford Foundation was financing covert CIA activities. Okay. Actually, when it comes to the Ford Foundation, the Rockefellers, usurp these foundations, but not in the case of the Ford Foundation. Henry Ford II turned the foundation over to the Rockefellers to control it, and they put John McCloy in charge, the top lawyer for the Rockefeller family. But that's another story. Okay. Now, what happened was George McBundy, when he left government service, when he left the Johnson administration, did what? Took over the chairmanship of the Ford Foundation. Okay. Who was Kennedy's Secretary of Defense? McNamara, president of Ford Motor Company. Okay.
Another time.
It goes on and on and on. How they're all interlocked, these foundations, and these things are super interlocked. Also, Timmy Geithner's, Timmy Geithner? I don't know if you're familiar with his name. What? Yeah, he was Treasury for Obama.
Right.
He's Treasury Secretary. His father was a vice president of Ford Motor Company. A lot of people don't know that. And his name was, Moore, I think Moore. Oh, geez, I wish I could get a Moore. Frederick Moore, was it? But anyways, I'm sorry, I apologize. Charles Frederick Moore. He's a pilgrim. Okay, he was a selectman too in Cape Cod. Okay, but that's different. That's a whole different. Okay. He was a Ford Motor Company vice president, and he was helping Rockefeller, Nelson, when he ran for president. He was running the press rooms across the country to serve Rockefeller, and he was more in the background. One of those press rooms was what? The Washington Post. Okay, that's another story. Watergate, I told you, but I don't want to skip out. I want to stick with these foundations, how they were controlling them all. So anyways, when McGeorge Bundy, they call Mac Bundy, stepped down, he took over the Ford Foundation. And what's his name? McNamara, excuse me for using what's his name. McNamara took over what? The World Bank, which has a history with what? The Rockefeller family. You follow its original presidents were all tied back with I think one of the guys' name was Black, VP of the Chase. All came out of the Chase Bank, the World Bank. See how they interlock?
Right.
And they use that fund. Go ahead.
Yeah, question. So I know the Dulles brothers, I believe Alan more so, maybe not, did a lot of legal work for the Rockefellers. Was Alan Dulles or John Foster Dulles involved with any of the legal work related to these 501c3s?
Absolutely, because they were partner. Well, actually, John Foster is the more significant brother, not Alan.
Okay.
Just like with Kennedy, JFK was the more significant brother, but obviously Bobby had a major role in his life and in his death. Okay. Yeah, it was really John Foster. But we know, we assassination research, we keep bringing up the CIA. You think, no, it was not. It was John Foster was the more significant brother. And I said it before, he was chairman of the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. These are foundations the Rockefellers moved in after Carnegie died and took them over. Who's going to stop these people? They got all the force in the world. They come at you lightning speed, and there's no early warning system. You don't even know they're coming at you. Okay, we can go on and on and on. But I want to talk about two of them. So they were sitting these Dulles brothers on multiple foundations. And, well, look for something here. Give me a second here. Actually, the Dulles family was born into the circles of power. All right. Where are you? I try to get organized, and I'm not organized. Where are you? Where are you? I wanted to show you New York Times clipping.
It's all right. Take your time.
Anyways, Dulles were born into the circle. First of all, they're part of the ancient dynasties. They're part of the Knickerbockery. The people, the early Dutch settlers who ruled the Hudson River Valley, which would include what? New York City. They owned the whole Hudson River Valley. So what's in New York City? America's most mightiest corporations. And these people go back into history. They owned the air rights, these families. The Dulles are related to, Alexander Hamilton. Alexander Hamilton married into the dynasty. He was the nation's first treasurer. And where was the first capital of the United States?
Philadelphia.
No, New York City.
It was.
George Washington took his oath of office at Washington Square now, and there's a tavern there. I went through it quickly one time. But here's the thing. Alexander Hamilton married the daughter of General Phil Schuyler, and her name was Katharina Rensselaer, the two wealthiest families in the Hudson River Valley. He married into the dynasty. And George Washington went to Phil Schuyler, begging Phil Schuyler to bail out the American Revolution, which he did. So right from the get-go, George Washington put the nation in debt to these people. That debt has never been paid off. It keeps accumulating. That's why the true capitalist country still is Wall Street, the money capital. Washington D.C. is just where they keep the puppet stage. The puppets that are controlled by the money elites. But here's what I'm going to show you. Now, Dulles, their uncle and grandfather. Their grandfather, John Foster, I think he was Secretary of State or something for one of those presidents. I'm sorry, I don't have this on. It was from the 1800s. Was it Harrison or Grover Cleveland? One of those presidents. So you can Google this stuff. That was the name, John Foster. Okay, and then their uncle, a lot of people know this, Robert Lansing, who was Secretary of State for Wilson, is the uncle of the Dulleses. He's their uncle. See, this is the circle of power. And they also have a history in my hometown, Auburn, New York. The Dulles lived here, and William Seward, of course, most famously. And there's a wedding. There was a marriage between, Avery Dulles is related to William Seward. There's a marriage here in the city of Auburn. One of the Sewards married, I got to remember his name. Alan Dulles, people think in fact, I think you mentioned to me that the Dulleses were related to the Rockefellers, but they're not.
Listen, it's like through a marriage. It's not a direct connection.
No, it was Avery. Okay. Avery. See, John Foster Dulles married Jane Avery. The last name was Avery. She was, I wish I could think of her name. On her side, that's how they're connected with Seward. Say they're related to her, to William Seward. Now, the Rockefeller, the Avery name is in the Rockefeller, but that's more of a greater kinship. But here's this article. Look at this. 1938. New York Times. Weekend party at Newport. You know Newport now. This was the Vanderbilt and Astor submarine hole. Right here. Feature of festivities to be debut today of Fernanda de Mohrenschildt. This is in the New York Times.
Yeah.
Here's another article. Here's the thing. I'm going to read down this row. Who's at this party? Who's at the wedding?
Okay.
Oh, no, that's not the one I wanted. It does time. I wanted to get the wedding. Oh, where's the wedding? Who's there? I'm going to cut to the chase. Who was there? Secretary of State Lansing was at the wedding when Nona got married. married George's uncle. I go to their graves. They're buried not too far from here. And how I go to the graves. I bring flowers to Nona, and I bring flowers to George's uncle, Ferdinand. See, the marriage only lasted a year. Okay, and then they did produce a daughter.
Oh, wow.
This is daughter here, Miss Fernanda de Mohrenschildt. Now, de Mohrenschildt, was Oswald's closest associate in the weeks leading up to the JFK assassination. Look at this headline in the New York Times.
Hmm.
De Mohrenschildt was the closest associate with Oswald in the days and weeks leading up to the Kennedy assassination. Here they are, front page. What?
And he was heavily discussed in the Warren Commission. There was lots of
information. There's 35,000 documents in the 26 volumes of Warren Commission documents. How many do you think I've read? And I've spent 40 years doing it.
I'm going to guess very little.
200.
Yeah.
You see, they put a name. Well, who is this person?
Yeah.
You can write volumes on all those names. Every one of those names, you can write a 500-page book. I wanted to show. Here it is. Here's the way. Here's the way. Miss McAdoo weds Russian diplomat. George is Russian, you know. Secretary's daughter married Fernanda de Mohrenschildt, embassy secretary. Basically, he's the ambassador, Tsarist Russia in Washington. See, here's Fernanda to Fernanda. It's female. How do you pronounce it? Ferdinand de Mohrenschildt. This is George Mohrenschildt's uncle. That's his closest associate. Let's go down the list who's at the wedding. I should have my readers here. Oh, where are my readers? Sorry, I didn't come prepared.
I think I threw you off a little bit with the issue the software was having.
But anyways. All right, now here. Oh, the President of the United States is there. Oh, this is dated 1917. This is going into World War I. Mm-hmm. And who was the ambassador? Ferdinand.
Okay.
Mohrenschildt. George's uncle is ambassador to Washington, the Tsarist government. Who's there? Oh, President of the United States. Is this important company? This is New York Times. President of the United States. Oh, Belfar. Wasn't he the guy who gave Israel to the Jews?
Yep.
Isn't that the guy?
I think so. I don't know that history that well, but that sounds right.
He signed. I just noticed that. Everything that's going on ties back to killing Kennedy. Who else is there? Oh, guess who her maid of honor was? This is George's aunt by marriage. Guess who her maid of honor was? Ethel Harriman. Ethel Harriman.
Oh, wow.
The railroad giants?
Yeah.
The Vanderbilts intermarried?
All right.
You don't get any more politically, socially, or financially connected than these people.
And wasn't there a Harriman on JFK's?
Well, he was the ambassador. He was JFK's ambassador at large, supposedly the ambassador of Vietnam. According to Johnson, he blamed Harriman for killing the DM brothers.
Right.
In Johnson's tapes. Vice President Mrs. Marshall. And who else? Secretary of State Lansing and Mrs. Lansing. Okay, now the Dulles brothers could have been at this wedding. They were going to make the headline because you see what I'm saying? So here's Alan Dulles. Oh, did you bother to tell anybody, Mr. Dulles, that your relatives were at the weddings of you're judging George Mohrenschildt? You're sitting in judgment of George Mohrenschildt, and your relatives? Is this a conflict of interest? We're at the weddings for the Mohrenschildts? I was his closest friend. Wow. Are you coming from an objective standpoint here, Mr. Dulles?
I believe I've never heard that connection being made. That's pretty impressive, Richard.
You know, I spent 40 years doing this. If you don't follow the trail to the Rockefeller front door, you don't see any of this.
Right.
You won't see it. People are too involved in trying to track down low-level spooks. You'll never get to the guy. I want to know who gave the order. I want to know who the apex predator was in this whole thing. What else are we going to do? Okay.
What other
else
Warren
was
Commission members you want to talk about? I don't want you to get off Dulles if you're not done, but
Well, let me think. Well, why don't we cover everything about Dulles?
we've done Dulles
Well,
and
I told you, they interlock with the Ford Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation, the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. If we got a little time, I'll tell you why that foundation is so important. But it ties to a massive amount of history with the Rockefellers at the center of it.
Mhm.
But then again, I want you to understand that this is what the Rockefellers did. They took over dead people's foundations. Carnegie's in the ground. He had no ears, basically. Although David Rockefeller's cousin, James Stillman Rockefeller, married to Carnegie. So sometimes they sit on boards.
All right, I want everybody to understand this. This is very important. So the details of this. So to take over a foundation, let's say the Carnegies, the shares are custodied usually at a bank. It could be Chase Bank's custody department. So what happens, the bank controls the voting rights to those shares. So the Rockefellers may not own the shares, but they control them all through the voting rights. And that's how they do it. And that's how they could, name the foundation, the Gates, Warren Buffett.
Well, one of the biggest is the McCarthy, John and Catherine MacArthur, whose name is mentioned in Warren Commission documents.
Right. So it's possible for the Rockefellers, even though they don't own those assets, to literally control them all through their whole network. And yeah, they got people, like you said, that serve as their sounding boards. They report to, they're under their control in one way, shape, or form, and they can influence these people very easily to do things that they want them to do. That's how it's done.
Explain that for me.
No problem.
You know, I just thought of something about Bundy.
Yeah.
Nelson Rockefeller was left two foundations, private trusts. I should say foundations, private trust from his grandfather. Okay. Who was the trustee of those foundations?
Oh.
One trustee. Who do you think it was? McGeorge Bundy.
Oh my God.
Anytime Nelson Rockefeller wanted money, he had to pick up a phone and call George Bundy. Now, not that he would be denied. Now, how do I know that? How do I know that?
And was that in Clash of Dynasties, or did I just forget that?
Yeah, it is a Clash of Dynasties.
Okay, I forgot it then. Yeah.
The Imperial Rockefeller. Is this upside down?
Nope.
The Imperial Rockefeller. Joe Persico. Now, how do I know that? It's in his book. Joe Persico spent 20 years with Nelson Rockefeller, Governor Rockefeller, and Vice President Rockefeller. He wrote all Rockefeller's speeches. Although when he was vice president, there wasn't much speech writing. That's another story.
Right.
But, yeah. So Bundy, Nelson Rockefeller would have to call. Now, Nelson Rockefeller went up for his confirmation hearing. Okay. He said, I'll put all my money in a blind trust. You know how I know he had these two? Because he said it when he went for his conference. I got these two trusts left to me by my grandfather, and if you so desire, and if I'm confirmed, I will put these trusts in a blind. I will put these trusts in a blind trust. Like, oh yeah, the Rockefellers aren't going to know what's in their trust. That's laughable.
Right.
But Bundy was the one guy, and then of course when he left Johnson, he went to where? The Ford Foundation.
Right.
They're all interlocked.
And then you have to ask the question, when McGeorge Bundy called off those airstrikes, which essentially, caused the whole operation to fail, you have to ask the question, was he intentionally sabotaging the president?
I would think so, yeah.
Right? It's a fair question.
Yeah. There were 4 people. I just learned another name. XCOM. XCOM committees, the XCOM. The closest.
I don't know them.
No, XCOM. It's a big part of Kennedy history. They were the Cuban Missile Crisis, the groups of heads that Kennedy brought together, and going into the Bay of Pigs. That was the XCOM.
Okay.
Short for Executive Committee or something. Okay. Who's on there? Dean Rusk, president of Rockefeller Foundation. C. Douglas Dillon, also a Rockefeller Foundation trustee.
And
Henry
head of the Secret Service, head of the Treasury, which is the head of the Secret Service.
Treasury Secretary. And he's the one who swore who? Howlings. He swore in Howlings, you know. JFK, who was head of Secret Service when JFK was shot in the head.
Exactly.
Rawlings. Was it Rawlings or Rawlings? Yeah.
Rowley.
Rowley. I'm sorry.
Rowley and Kelly were the ones that instructed Elmer Moore to pressure Dr. Perry to change his testimony about the entrance wound to the throat. So we don't know if Kelly and Rowley got a separate order from Dillon, but it's very possible.
Well, Dillon swore him in. And who came for the ceremony? JFK.
All right.
There's pictures of that on the internet, so I know.
I think it's kind of fair to say JFK really had no idea how much power was around him from the Rockefellers on his own cabinet. I think he was fairly clueless as to what he was up against.
Well, let me add two names. Now, I'm going to address that, what you just said. It's very important.
Yeah.
You had, and C. Douglas Dillon, oh, by the way, Sullivan and Cromwell, what the Dulleses were, you know, the law firm Sullivan and Cromwell, that was their German trade, you know. Sullivan and Cromwell handled the German trade for Standard Oil and Rockefellers. Okay, when John Foster Dulles ran for senator, New York State Senator, of course, he was appointed because somebody died. So he was appointed. So he ran. He'd have to run. It's only a temporary appointment. He got painted a Nazi. He ran against a Jew. He ran against Lehman. Okay. Lehman Brothers. Oh, by the way, headquartered at Rockefeller Center. And the Lehman townhouse is like 2 doors away from Nelson Rockefeller's down at 54th Street. Lived at 54th. That's another story. You had, C. Douglas Dillon went, they were on the corner of Park. They're still there. Dillon and Reed.
Mm-hmm.
It's a major investment bank on the corner of their Midtown, or on the corner of Madison Avenue and 5th and Madison Avenue and 55th. So Nelson Rockefeller had a private office 1 block away. You go past the Astor Hotel, you cross 5th, you're at Nelson Rockefeller. The building's been demolished. Nelson Rockefeller was not, when he was governor of Rockefeller, he would never bring state people up to Rockefeller Center. He wasn't going to bring them into room 5670. So he used to meet with them in his private office, ground floor office. He had an office for Kissinger above him. And Nelson had the ground floor. So any state people, he had all state business down there. He used to call it the unofficial capital of New York State back in the day. Well, Sullivan Cromwell shared those offices with Dillon and Reed. Now, Dillon and Reed ties to who? The death of James Forstro. But I don't want to get into that now because we're going to go on and on and on. But also, there's an address in Warren Commission documents where George was working on the corner of Madison and 55th Street. They never said which corner, though. Okay. Anyways, let's go back to the XCOM committee. Now, I just learned this. Who else was involved in the XCOM committee was Roswell Gilpatrick. You know, I bumped into his name so many times over the years, never paid much attention to it, but he's got Rockefeller name tattooed all over him, including the Museum of Modern Art. If you know anything about the Kennedy assassination, you'll see that all the trails lead to the Museum of Modern Art, which was started by the Rockefellers. Okay. And he also had an affair with Jackie Kennedy. Jackie Kennedy was well acquainted with George Mohrenschildt. Okay. George Mohrenschildt was well acquainted with Jackie Kennedy's mother. We could go on and on and on in this, right? And also all the people in Roswell Gilpatrick, who was, I should look him up more. Well, you know what he was at? He was on this. This was the Rockefeller blueprint. His name is right here. This was the Rockefeller blueprint for their domination of the planet, the federalization of the planet, written in the mid-50s. The Rockefeller panel.
Interesting. I've never heard of that book.
Well, this is the blueprint. The Rockefellers wanted to federalize the planet, and and they wanted to dominate or destroy Russia and Soviets. This was the blueprint. for that plant. And you'll see how a lot of these names, well, Henry Luce for one, you'll see them, they're positioned in key positions within the government bureaucracy. I just thought, Ovida Culp, Secretary of Housing for Eisenhower, Henry Luce, Percy, Charles Percy, related to the Rockefellers, and of course the Rockefeller family, of course, David Charnoff, RCA, all those, history there, Rockefeller Center. Adolph Burl, but you wouldn't know his name. I don't want to get into it now. Arthur Burns, wasn't he chairman of the Federal Reserve Bank at one time, back in the 50s? But there's a lot more names in there. But anyways, so this Roswell Gilpatrick was also part of the ex-com. So you got why are all these people? Here's what happened. And this is where Kennedy made a big mistake. Going back to the point you made. Kennedy's elected president. Okay, he wants to do a good job. So he wants the smartest minds that he can recruit. Okay. And I think Schlesinger lived on the backside of David Rockefeller's home on 65th Street. They shared backyard wall. That's another issue. Okay. So see what the Rockefellers do. These are the authorities, 96 authorities, people expert every sector. Well, who declares these people the experts? Not because they're smarter than you and me, but they're going to serve. The Rockefellers are not going to publish a blueprint for world domination and just throw it on a shelf to collect dust. It's going to become the law of the world. Okay? And these people are Kissinger the best. Well, Kissinger supervised it all. Yeah, it was Nelson Rockefeller. I'm sorry I didn't get this out for me. You want to know who killed Kennedy? Look at the end game. I bring up Kissinger's name, but we're going to get back to your point. So what Kennedy's going to do is he wants the greatest brains he can get. Mm-hmm. Well, who declares these people the greatest brains? Not because they're smarter than you and I, because they're executing the Rockefeller agenda. They're going to take this book and make it the law of the world. Rockefeller domination.
So let me ask a question. Isn't it true that during Kennedy's campaign, he used Rockefeller reports? And is it also fair to say that the Rockefellers wanted JFK elected and they did not want Nixon in the White House originally? Is that a fair statement? Yeah.
I got the bonds with Nelson Rockefeller in 1960. I got all the campaign bonds. I should have had them out for you. I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Nelson Rockefeller, Rocky, 1960, draft Rocky, 1960. Okay, he dropped out to back JFK.
Yeah.
Okay, they despised Richard Nixon.
Right.
The plot to kill Kennedy, I believe, that's another story, began in 1947, November 24th of 1970. That was the plot to kill JFK. It was birthed. But they were not looking to kill JFK. He wasn't even on the radar yet. They were looking to kill Richard Nixon. Why? I mentioned it. The Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Okay. When he was a congressman, a lowly Congress, he made himself world famous. What did he do? He painted Elger Hess. Elger Hess, a communist. Elger Hess worked for the State Department. Also, principally involved with the world of Rockefeller.
Right.
Elger Hess was president of the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Okay. So when lowly Congressman Richard Nixon was throwing red paint on Elger Hess, don't forget, we're going into the McCarthy era. Okay. Who's on the foundation? John Foster Dulles, right? He's chairman of it. Who else is on it? David Rockefeller. He's getting red paint splattered on him. Who else? Thomas Watson, founder of IBM, he's getting hit with red paint. And who else? Dwight Eisenhower, General Dwight Eisenhower. Okay. All getting hit with red paint. Now, the Rockefellers are fixing to run Dwight Eisenhower as president of the United States. Okay. And they were going to run him with who? John Hay Whitney, one of the richest men in the world, and who I connected to JFK assassination, but that's another story. They want him to run as vice president. Okay. Am I getting too much off the topic here?
Yeah, we do want to get, I want to make sure we get to Boggs and to Cooper. I know you wanted to
All right,
talk about
let's
those
go
two,
to
so.
yeah. The plot that killed JFK originally was a plot that killed Nixon. See, Eisenhower hated. He used to spit at to mention Nixon's name. Actually, it was Eisenhower that sunk his campaign. If you know the story, he made a little comment.
Hmm.
Okay,
Yep.
I don't want to get into that now, but they wanted John Hay Whitney to run. Well, here's what happened. This is why the Rockefellers loathed Richard Nixon, and Eisenhower spit at the mention of his name. They were forced to put Nixon on because Eisenhower, he's the guy. He was already painted red because he sacked who? He sacked Patton, George Patton, the guy who said, "Oh, the wrong side won the war." Patton was a rabid anti-communist. They wanted to invade the Soviet Union. We got the army here. Let's go in and kick their butts. See? So Eisenhower sacked MacArthur. Eisenhower sacked Patton. So he's already got red paint on him. Now you got Nixon spraying red paint on him. See? Okay. So they were forced. This is why Eisenhower went to the grave with a grudge against Nixon because he was forced to put Nixon on the ticket. He had to eat crack to put Nixon because now it makes, oh, I'm not a communist. I got the biggest red baiter in the country on my ticket. See, to save face. He was for it. They know they took the Rockefeller hand and they took Eisenhower's hand. Richard Nixon twisted their arm, put him on the ticket because he had painted them all red. So how else could he save? How else could Eisenhower save face? And the Rockefellers as well. Okay. All right. We're all right. Let's talk about. We're going to talk about Cooper.
Yeah, let's do
All
Cooper.
right. Oh,
John Sherman Cooper.
you want to know kill Kennedy? This is going to be the cover of my new book. Here's the end game here. Who's in the Oval Office? Who should have been there?
Kissinger, Ford, and Rockefeller we have in that picture.
Yeah. Okay. But who should have been there?
It should have been RFK.
Yes. I'm glad you said that because most people say Nixon. Yeah. Well, Watergate was all Nelson Rockefeller's doings.
All right.
Say that's another story. Okay. Who's in the end game? Oh, Henry Kissinger. By the guy. He oversaw he kind of authored his book.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the plan. Who else is there? Oh, Mr. Gerald Ford, Warren Commissioner. And who's in the middle? The God, Nelson Rockefeller. And they're all looking at him, and he's looking like, I'm giving the orders here.
Certainly does.
See the globe? You see the globe?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. The Rockefellers want the globe. Okay. See, when I hold this book up, you think I'm talking out of my head? So then again, Nixon, what Rockefeller did, what Kennedy did, the mistake that killed him was he took these people, oh, they're the authority. I want them on my administration. All right. Okay, let's talk about, what are we talking about? Cooper, Hero Boggs. Let's talk about Gerald Ford. I want to talk about Cooper. You know, Nelson Rockefeller and Richard Nixon had a meeting. Did you know about this? It's in my book.
Yes.
Nelson Rockefeller lived on the corner of Fifth Avenue and 62nd Street. He had a penthouse there. It was a what they call 3-floor penthouse. They call it a triplex. But then he went through his divorce. I'll say 61. He went through his divorce, so he had to split up some of those floors. He had Richard Nixon living with him. When Nixon got defeated in California, he brought Richard Nixon to the White House, lived in his home, his townhouse in New York City. He had his ex-wife living in one. I'm sure he gave one floor to his ex-wife. He took over the top floor, and he had Richard Nixon there living somehow. Now, didn't I just tell you they hated Nixon?
It was a real love-hate. They went back and forth, I think, several times.
Here's the thing. The Rockefellers will have to swallow a little pride because, listen, here's what their plan is. If I can't be, don't forget, Nelson Rockefeller is seeking the White House. So what Rockefeller is saying, if I can't get to the White House, then it's got to be somebody I can control. So I'm going to keep Richard Nixon here as my little boy on ice, and we'll see how things go. And we'll see. You see how Nixon was doing carrying all the water for the Rockefellers. See, that's what happened. Okay, where was I now? Oh,
Cooper?
Cooper. Oh, yeah. So if you study Nixon or Rockefeller, you study their biographies, they had a meeting. There was a convention going on in Chicago. Now, Rockefeller's governor of New York State. Nixon flew in for the meeting with Rockefeller. Nobody else in the room except for there was a phone hookup. Who was on the phone?
Cooper?
Cooper. Cooper was back at the convention with the platform committee. Who else was in that room with Cooper? Charles Piercy, Nelson, who was related. He married Charles Piercy, daughter married John Rockefeller IV, Senator Rockefeller. Sharon Piercy, who, by the way, was on she might still be on the Rockefeller Foundation, but she doesn't use the Rockefeller name.
Okay.
Just Sharon Piercy. Now people would know that's a Rockefeller. A lot of the Rockefeller girls don't use their Rockefeller name. That's throughout their history. Okay, because in the Rockefeller world, women are told to keep their mouth shut and they'll marry well off. Period. They don't have a say. Where am I now? Okay, Cooper.
Yeah, Cooper.
Let me tell you something about Cooper. So anytime the Rockefellers have a secret meeting, there's always a third person in the room. You'll see that throughout their history. I've studied these criminals for 40 years. Cooper was that third person. Okay. Why? Why do they want this third person here? I'm going to tell you why. Now, he could be a witness, yeah, but what that third person becomes is the go-between. So if Nixon and Rockefeller need to communicate, they're going to go through Cooper, who, by the way, was very close. Cooper was very close to John Foster Dulles. I never did a deep dive in. But Cooper, by the way, Cooper was Skull and Bones. Okay. Everybody who killed Kennedy, who conspired, had a representative on the Warren Commission. Skull and Bones was principally involved in the Rockefeller plot to kill JFK. George Bush, was the junior in the conspiracy. They had him in Dealey Plaza. He's photographed with his preppy New England sport clothes on, standing there watching JFK get killed. It's not him. Oh, no, it's not him. Ruby was photographed there, too. Oh, it's not Ruby. No, it's not Ruby, no. That's the official version. Okay, who else was this Skull and Bones? Henry Luce. Well, who come in and bought the Zavruta film? Henry Luce. His name is in his book. Who bought the Zavruta film? Henry Luce. Life magazine. They buried it in their archives so nobody could see it. At least not. They let out a couple of photographs. Someday we'll talk about 313 and frame 313. We'll do a show on that. So they buried it. They bought it so nobody could see it. Aren't they foxy? Of course, where's Life magazine headquartered? Rockefeller Center, right on 6th Avenue, right across 30 Rockefeller Plaza is the Time Life building.
So, Richard, I want to interrupt for a quick second. I was just doing a quick search on this. July 24th, 1960. So much has been said. This is from the New York Times this weekend about the disagreements between Vice President Nixon and Governor Rockefeller, that very little attention has been paid to one very remarkable item of agreement in their Saturday morning communique. That's the meeting that you were talking about. It goes on, blah, blah, blah. And then it talks about John Sherman Cooper of Kentucky, chairman of the Republican Convention's Foreign Affairs Subcommittee, went to Governor Rockefeller's office for the same purpose. They both requested Mr. Rockefeller help them draft the platform, which he refused to do or allow his associates to do. But he did agree to give them specific drafts of paragraphs he wanted in the platform and to supplement these with relevant passages of his own speeches on national and international affairs. So that's, a little more color onto what you said about the meeting. Yep, all in the book.
This is the plan is being imposed on the nation and the Republican platform.
Yeah.
Rockefellers don't have to be in the room to rule.
Correct.
If they're in the room, they're the de facto bosses, but even outside of the de facto bosses, they have their agents like Cooper. All right, let's get more into Cooper here. Cooper, talk about the Mohrenschildt, right? Here's an article in the New York Times. Cooper married a woman. R.H. McAdoo. This is Nona's brother. Remember Nona?
Mm-hmm.
Remember the parties at Newport?
Yep.
She was a McAdoo. She married George's uncle, Ferdinand Mohrenschildt, right? I go to their graves. There's 4 of them buried, Sleepy Hollow. I bring roses. He, by the way, is not married there. It's Nona Ferdinand, the mother, Nona's mother, and another sibling there. I'm not sure who it is. Okay. So here he is, R.H. McAdoo, Robert McAdoo, Nona's brother, marries this lady, Mrs. Lorraine Rowan. They're from California. Well, McAdoo was everything to the Rockefellers. I'm talking about William Gibbs, her father, his father. Okay. He went out, he won a carpet bag. He was Wilson's Secretary of Treasury, helped set up the Federal Reserve Bank, which was a Rockefeller creation. Then he went out to California and won a carpet bag election in California and was involved in taking a bribe from who? Edward Doheny. Okay, well, that was all about the Teapot Dome scandal, right? If you ever studied that, it was the big dark chapter in American history.
Yep.
Edward Doheny, okay, he passed the bribe to McAdoo. And McAdoo said, well, I didn't know. I'll give the money back. Yeah, as though he didn't know. You know, if you know the history, it was all Rockefeller plot. They wanted to get the Navy oil reserves away from the Navy, and they plowed them into the Department of Interior so they could buy them through the Department of Interior, which regulates the use of federal land. Okay. And then, well, George Mohrenschildt in his Warren Commission testimony. Well, who was head of this? Well, who was one of the big players in it? Harry Sinclair, right? Sinclair Oil with the dinosaur on this, you know what I mean? It was one of the biggest. Well, who in his Warren Commission documents, George said, I was working for people connected with Sinclair Oil in Hades. They were looking for oil possibilities in Hades, right? Well, where's Sinclair Oil headquartered in 1963? Rockefeller Center. All right. Now, he divorced Robert and Lorraine divorced. Then who did Lorraine marry? Cooper.
Oh, wow.
There's a photograph, multiple photographs. When President Kennedy was President Kennedy-elect, they invited for a little private dinner, intimate setting, just the 2 couples. It was President Kennedy, Mrs. Kennedy, and Cooper, and Lorraine. And Lorraine, she had become Lorraine Roman. She had kind of became Lorraine Roman, now Lorraine Roman Cooper. She had became kind of a Washington madam. I mean, I shouldn't say Washington madam. Washington hostess, you know, kind of like in the mold of Dolly Madison. And they had this private party, not a party, just an intimate dinner setting for the 2 couples. And its pictures are out there on the internet if you want to see them. I thought that was interesting. Now, he's also, I told you, Cooper was Skull and Bones. So everybody who killed Kennedy was represented on the Warren Commission. So obviously Cooper was representing Skull and Bones. Okay, so here's something here I picked up. Just kind of Googling around. Kissinger Associates had strategic alliance with several firms, including Blackstone, which I believe is the Rockefeller front. There's 4 names here, but Covington and Burling. Are you familiar with that firm? Well, Dean Acheson, who was Truman's Secretary of State, was famously connected with this law firm. First of all these law firms, who do they represent? The industrial elite, the financial elite, the corporate elite, the Rockefellers. Okay. Oh, so now I get a list of people who were with Covington and Burling. Okay, we got Dean Acheson. Oh, John Bolton. Was he the John Bolton? John R. Bolton, can you check that? Remember, he was Secretary. John R. Bolton, was he Secretary of State for
Let's check. Bolton, Secretary of State. Oh, of course.
Exactly.
John, of course. Yeah.
And I thought he was going to be the heir apparent to Henry Kissinger, but see, he wrote that book, and Rockefellers don't like publicity, so they dunked him. Who else is here? Oh, didn't we talk about William Bundy?
Yeah.
William Bundy was married to Dean Acheson's daughter.
Wow.
The Acheson's family and his mother's side owned Canadian Club. Did you know that?
No, I
They're
did not.
Canadian. Well, Canadian Club was one of the big top-selling alcohols during Prohibition. They were smuggling across the border. Oh, who else was with this law firm? John Sherman Cooper. Oh. Oh, who else is in this law firm? Donald Hiss. Then I just talk about Elger Hiss. Donald Hiss was
Yeah.
Elger Hiss's brother.
Wow.
So, anyways, there's a connection there. So, what else have we covered?
Let's hit Hale Boggs.
Okay, Hell Boggs is big. Who did Hell Boggs represent? Clay Shaw.
Oh, okay.
Okay, here's the story. Where are you? I just had you here. Where are you? Where are you? Please, please. Oh, here it's right in front of me. Here, check this out.
Yep.
The story of International House and International Trademark. This was published in 1974. Who was vice president?
Rockefeller.
Nelson Rockefeller, okay. Let's go here. Who founded this thing? Oh, by the way, why am I bringing this up?
Well,
Because Oswald was at a news crew, television news team, photographed Oswald in front of this building in New Orleans, this trademark, it's International House / trademark. And they got in a scuffle. You know the story. He was passing out pro-Castro hands-off Cuba leaflets and all that stuff. He was
yep.
parading as a communist. Probably ordered to do so. Finding a communist in New Orleans is like finding a rare. That was like the city of Dallas. Communists would be considered vermin. Well, let's go to its founding.
The
He
founding
talks
of,
about a rate,
of what?
1944, of this bill. Now, International House was started by the Rockefellers. Their most famous one is is attached to Columbia University.
Right. So
Okay.
just to be clear, you're talking about the trademark in New Orleans right now.
Correct. But it's
Okay.
the International House and trademark. Most people don't call it International. International House was started by the Rockefellers.
Got
Their
it.
most famous location is Columbia University. And I
Okay.
believe it has a history with the city of Auburn. I think it was started by the Dulles. The Dulles have a big history with the city of Auburn. But I don't need to get into all that now. If they talk about a radio broadcast, 1944. This radio broadcast was famous because it was conspicuous by its presence in the middle of a war to have merited inclusion by the networks. Oh, who owns all the networks? Rockefeller Center. And featured a Washington hookup at which Nelson Rockefeller, then coordinator of Latin American affairs, spoke. He referred to International House as our good neighbor policy in action. Remember when he was the coordinator, it was supposed to be the good neighbor policy with Latin America? He says their front. He praised its aims and congratulated the men who had made it possible.
By the way, we could do a whole nother episode on Rockefeller's position there. It was essentially the Central Intelligence Agency of the Americas. It was a predecessor to the CIA. Yeah, to the CIA. Nelson Rockefeller ran it. Most people do not realize the ties Nelson Rockefeller had to the intelligence community.
You know, all these names like Dulles, any of these names, William Harvey, Bill Harvey, any of these names that connect to JFK assassination, CIA people, they were all working for Nelson Rockefeller out of Rockefeller Center during World War II when Nelson was the coordinator.
Yep.
Now let's go on here. Oh, he talks about him. I don't want to read it all. I'm going to kind of paraphrase it. He talks of Mr. Hackland suggested employing Herman G. Brock, formerly an officer with the Guaranteed Bank of New York. Oh, we go back to New York City, Guaranteed Bank. Well, that's all part of the J.P. Morgan Chase empire now, as the first paid manager of the organization. Okay, then he had some personal problems. Okay, he had to get out. Then it goes here. To succeed him, Nelson Rockefeller's office was contacted. Thanks to the help of George Healy Jr. and active duty with the United States Office of War Information, which I believe was run by Franklin Roosevelt's son in Washington. J. Stanton Robbins was elected managing director. He had worked in Nelson's office and had prior experience in world travel and agency. Okay, they're dispatching these agents from his office. You go to New Orleans, you run this operation, you go here, you run. They're their They're their agents.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like John McCloy's, that's how the octopus works. Like John McCloy was on 25, a useful idiot.
Right.
Standing in. All he is a rubber stamp for the Rockefellers. Okay, now, well, whose position did this guy take over? Well, let's go back a few more pages.
Yeah.
I gotta do more. Meanwhile, efforts were underway to rent the space to worthwhile tenants. At this point, 1946, Mr. Bett recommended Major Clay Shaw. Oh, wasn't he indicted for the assassination of JFK? To become manager of International Trademark. That existed only in architect plans and designs. Mr. Shaw had just returned to civilian life after a noteworthy 4 years in the armed services, after receiving many decorations. This guy was decorated by the French government. And paving distinguished, it's a little misspelled, distinguished for scoring the second highest IQ rating of any inductee up to that time. Well, you know, anybody who works in military intelligence, they subject them to IQ tests. Anybody who works in intelligence, they have to have super high IQs. Okay. Plus, this guy spoke French. I'm sure being from New Orleans, he spoke French. So French is an international language. You know what I'm trying to say?
Right. So how does this tie to Boggs?
Oh, I'm going to tell you how to tie it to Boggs. You mind if I walk away for a second?
Yeah, go ahead. I'll fill in while you do that.
I got it. Never mind. I get talking a lot. There's a little dust in the air. I get a little allergy going here.
Oh, yeah, no worries.
All right. Now, where are we now? Oh, let's how it ties to the Boggs. Oh, you know, he disappeared in a plane crash. His body was never recovered.
Right.
In Alaska. Oh, let's see Boggs now. Let's see Boggs. Oh, let's talk about Boggs. The same article.
Yeah.
Remember I told you Boggs was protecting Clay Shaw?
Mm-hmm.
Now we get into the last show I did with David James Day was about the check. Okay. About the testimony of Robert Easterling and Dan Reynolds. We're going to do a show on that.
While you're looking that up, we can probably do I don't know if there'd be separate shows, but we could do Rockefeller ties to the Texas School Book Depository and Rockefeller ties to the Trade Mart in Dallas as well. But keep going.
Well, we're doing it now.
Yeah. Cool.
Okay, here it goes on. Trading account goes on and talks about social functions, all a part of the slogan suggested by international houses, used by T. Hal Lindy Boggs, our chairman. Oh no, our charming and much loved. Oh, here it is. Our charming and much loved Congressperson, dedicated to world peace and trade and understanding. Yeah. Oh, here it is. He talks about then Governor of Louisiana, Sam Jones. He talks about Mr. Zetzman. Then he goes on. Oh, he was, okay. This is early in its forming now. He talks about this Mr. Zetzman as its chairman, the organization committee. Hal Boggs was employed as its first secretary.
Oh, wow.
So he was involved in setting this up. Yeah. In the same article, Nelson, what? Oh, who's this Alonzo Ensenat? The author?
Yeah.
I worked for Snoozer Roblox. He was one of their VPs of marketing.
Huh.
Okay.
Interesting.
Here's the thing. Ensenat, you know, when Hal Boggs died, who took his job?
Don't remember.
His wife.
Wow.
She ran for a seat. And who was her campaign director and advisor on it? Confidant. Alonzo Ensenat's son. Who, by the way, roomed at who? George Herbert, well, George 43. I mean,
Yeah.
Bush 43
Right. Right.
at Yale. And Bush is Skull and Bones now,
Right.
as was his father. I don't know if Ensenat was Skull and Bones. I don't know if he was, but George was. So he's rooming Skull and Bones. Come on.
And I'm in the same fraternity as Bush. Not Skull and Bones, but the other one. No connection there, though.
Would that be a Scroll and Key?
Deke, Delta Kappa Epsilon.
Yeah, I'm not really up on all these fraternities.
Started at Yale. They say Skull and Bones is kind of like a subset of Deke.
Well, from what I understand, all these fraternities, these were elite Protestants. They all trace back to Freemasons. And over the years, they spun off and divided off. And Scroll and Key was part of Skull and Bones. And also, these are the three elite. I did a lot of videos. I just posted one of them. You should go see my videos on my channel, Richard James DeSocio on YouTube, where I did my tour of Rockefeller, Yale University. We could do another show on that. It's hugely ties to the JFK assassination.
Yeah,
and it's
on that note, I just want to give you a heads up. I got a hard stop in about 8 minutes. Is there anything else you want to plug in terms of any last comments on the Warren Commission and any books or anything else you want to?
I don't know. We got David Beelan.
Yeah.
He was the executive director of the Rockefeller Commission.
Yeah.
We got Gerald Ford. Oh, we got to do. Can you give me a second?
Yeah, we're gonna have to do a follow-up episode to this.
Well, I want to show you. There's 33 people on the Warren Commission, 32 men and one woman. They're all lawyers. Some lawyers turn politicians. Okay. Yeah. Now, there's one historian who worked for the Rand think tank, who was on the board of the Rand think tank, Henry Kissinger. And I believe the Rand think tank was managing MK Ultra for the Rockefellers. That's another back of the story. I believe Oswald was part of MK Ultra. Okay. Breland was their executive director. And he's on this. Okay, who else was on it? Where was I? I forgot my point. I'm thinking too fast.
Yeah, it's okay. We were on Bellin.
Yeah, this guy went to the grave begging for a second Warren Commission investigation. Oh, yeah. Listen, 33 lawyers, either Harvard or Yale, okay, or they turned politicians. One historian, now one forensic investigator.
All right.
You think they'd have one guy who retired from some metropolitan police force to sit down there? No, there was no investigation. What it was the FBI said this is how it happened. Oswald acted alone, okay? And what these guys did, they were all lawyers, including our inspector, who went in there and they basically made the closing argument for what the Warren Commission, the closing argument. The jury was the American people. They wrote the closing argument, okay? Right. Now, of course, the defense didn't have any say. It was purely one-sided.
Most people don't realize Arlen Specter, his public record clearly states he had serious misgivings about his own theory, the single bullet theory. He didn't even really, he really had doubts about it, and he stated so publicly.
Arlen Specter was part of Philadelphia, and everything you said, I agree. But yeah. Arlen Specter was part of the Philadelphia Democrat machine. Who was running that machine? Who ran that machine? It was run by J. Richardson Dilworth.
Okay.
You know that name?
No, I don't.
His uncle, Joseph Richardson Dilworth, was mayor of Philadelphia. He was also the Democrat Party boss there. That's the machine that Arlen Specter came out of. And his wife, Specter's wife, was on the city council. J. Richardson Dilworth ran the family office for the Rockefellers. Okay, and he was also went before when Nelson Rockefeller was nominated. Not nominated. Yeah, he was nominated for his hearing. He went before the hearing. He come out behind the dark veil. Here's a name here. Let me read you this name. There's 14 assistant counsels, all lawyers. William Thaddeus Coleman Jr. Do you know that name?
Sounds somewhat familiar.
He worked for J. Richardson Dilworth.
Okay.
So here's this guy working for J. Richardson Dilworth, who, by the way, is Skull and Bones. J. Richardson Dilworth. And J. Richardson Dilworth is running the family office for the Rockefellers. And he went before Nelson Rockefeller's hearing. He's on the Warren Commission. See how they tied to the Rockefellers? When does it end? But I want to talk about this Gerald Ford. You're not going to even believe it what I got to tell you about it. Can you give me a couple extra minutes?
We got 4 to 6 minutes. So definitely got to be quick.
I researched this, and I just learned something. I've been going for 40 years on this stuff.
Yeah.
Here's a document here. Okay.
Yeah.
It's an FBI document. It was in this book. Who's on the cover of the book?
Oh yeah, Nelson.
Okay, and who's it to? Who's it about? Oswald's closest friend, George D. Mohrenschildt's story. Now, I wouldn't call him call this guy a friend, but I say associate. Here's this document here. Let me read this down. Here's what I found out just the other day. This is an FBI document. It was generated out of the Mexican embassy in Washington. They generated it. Let me read this. I telephoned RA with somebody's initials, not important right now, to notify Mr. Nelson Rockefeller about this alien who, according to Mr. Duhart, is trying to get a position with Mr. Rockefeller. Well, that alien is stated right here, Jerzy von Mohrenschildt. Oh, actually, right here. You see that number?
Mm-hmm.
That's his dossier number. The FBI had a file on this guy during World War II, suspecting him of being a German agent, and it's stamped received 1942. Guess where this document was found?
Where? In the archives?
In the papers of Gerald Ford.
Wow.
In other words, the FBI turned this document over to the Warren Commission, and what did Ford do? He took it and hid it from the Warren Commission. To protect who? Nelson Rockefeller.
Well, that wouldn't be the first time Ford did something very shady regarding this investigation. I think it's very fair to say if he was alive today, very easily you could have convicted Ford of obstruction of justice. The guy's a friggin' disgrace to this country. Absolute disgrace.
Well, they got aircraft carriers named after him, shooting at Iran.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which goes back to, that's the one show we got to really do. Yeah. Is the Mossadegh, when the Rockefeller smacked out. You'll see how they manipulated the chessboard, the devil's chessboard.
Yep.
There's a book, The Devil's Chessboard. You see
really how Yep, I'm really looking forward to doing that episode. That'll be excellent. So, yeah, let's wrap it up here. So, just quick summary. We covered all the obvious. Dulles, McCloy. We went into Ford, Boggs, Cooper, a little bit into Specter, Rankin, and Bellin. There's some lesser known names that we could go into, on a separate episode that have looser ties to the Rockefellers. But I think what we've established here is some, real strong ties to the Rockefellers and this Warren Commission. And there's more to this. Like I said, the Texas School Book Depository, we touched on the Trade Mart a little bit today. We can do more on that. But there is a massive Rockefeller imprint on this whole Kennedy assassination, for sure. So thank you very much, Richard, for
giving me a chance to get the truth out.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing all this. And we're going to keep doing more of these. And, I just want to say that I'm really going quite backwards on this because I did a episode on the Rockefeller Commission the other day, which has just been posted. Now we're going backwards to the Warren Commission. I feel like, the Texas School Book Depository and the Trade Mart probably should have been done first, but it doesn't really matter. It's all great material. So looking forward to doing more on that and Iran. Any final thoughts, Richard?
I just appreciate that. I think more people are slowly coming to the truth.
Yeah.
There's a video out there now that CIA, JFK, and the CIA, when they bring up the Rockefeller name frequently. Not that they won't go as far as saying the Rockefeller pulled the trigger,
Yeah.
but they're saying all these people, like the Dulles, all somehow have this connection to the Rockefellers. So who's the
Right.
master of all this?
Yeah, and I've heard people say, the Rockefellers are just a bunch of rich people. They get blamed for stuff. Like people do not realize, again, how dialed into the CIA they were. It's amazing the lack of knowledge there. So we'll leave it at that. Thank you very much, Richard. Again, we'll talk again soon, and we'll post this very shortly. So thank you, everybody. Have a great day.